to still be with you. I'm Katie Tur. DA Fani Willis can stay on her Trump election interference case, but if she does, Special Prosecutor Nathan Wade has to go. We're waiting on her decision, but while this is a big win for the Fulton County DA's office, Judge Scott McAfee's decision was scarring. Andrew Weissman joins me in a moment to explain what stood out to him and what he says continues to jeopardize that case. But it's not just Georgia. There was another seemingly small but actually pretty significant ruling in Florida by Judge Aileen Cannon. She rejected one of Trump's motions to dismiss the classified documents case against him, saying his argument of constitutional vagueness is premature. Why Weissman argues it might have been better for special counsel Jack Smith if she threw out the case entirely. And what about the hush money case in Manhattan? DA Alvin Bragg's office says it's turning over even more documents to Trump's legal team today, now giving them 100,000 pages and counting of new evidence. What that means for the trial, which was supposed to start in just over a week. Joining us now, MSNBC legal correspondent Lisa Rubin. As promised, former FBI general counsel and former member of Robert Mueller's special counsel investigation into Russian interference in the 2016 campaign election. Andrew Weissman and former Fulton County deputy district attorney and MSNBC legal analyst Melissa Redmond. Everybody welcome. Melissa, I want to start with you because Fulton County is your specialty. What did you think of today's decision?
It was interesting to me. I think we were, or at least I was anticipating Judge McAfee to make a decision of which standard applied, whether it be actual conflict of interest or an appearance of impropriety. And when he instead analyzed both. And so I think that really limits the defendant's ability to appeal his denial of their motion for disqualification, finding there was no actual conflict of interest. And even with the appearance of impropriety, it did not arise to one that would warrant disqualification as opposed to remedy. So I think because he covered both bases in this order, it kind of makes it very tight in that it's likely to withstand an appeal if one is granted, if the Court of Appeals were inclined to even accept a certificate of immediate review. So
he mentions one of the remedies of all of this behavior, which he's not condoning, is the voters of Fulton County. The voters elected DA Fani Willis into that position. Do you have a sense of how Georgians in Fulton County specifically feel about what they've seen unfold?
I think it depends on who you ask. I think those who support the DA will say that this was all an interference into her personal life and had nothing at all to do with her job and how she's performing her job, and that they are pleased with the way she's performed her job based on her popularity. I think if you're a defense, I think you will be hard-pressed to find a defense attorney that's happy with the way any prosecutor office operates and how they bring their cases. So, again, I think it depends on who you ask. I think those who feel like she should have known better. I don't think there's much of an argument there. You really don't want to hire someone you're in a personal relationship with. But how does that impact the way you're bringing or how cases are prosecuted, which cases are prosecuted? Are you bringing the cases that need to be brought and dismissing those that need to be dismissed? I think that is going to be the greater concern with the residents of Fulton County. So if Nathan Wade gets booted from this case, which he likely will, it's unlikely that DA Fani Willis is going to recuse herself or step down with her entire office. Does that diminish, does that hurt the office? Does it hurt the case if Nathan Wade is no longer on it any longer, Melissa? Again, I think it depends on who you ask. I think for those in the office, you kind of take your licks as a prosecutor. Judges rule against you sometimes. Sometimes you lose evidence and you kind of have to regroup and say, OK, where do we go from here? And I would imagine that would be the way the prosecutors in this case would approach it. It's like, OK, this happened. It's been dealt with. The judge has issued his ruling. How do we proceed from now? How do we get back on track and get back to the business of prosecuting this case? So, Andrew, I teased you up in the open a couple times because I think your take on this is interesting. Tell me what you read into Judge Scott McAfee's decision to let Fani Willis stay on this case.
Well, I agree with Melissa completely that by deciding that he was going to say, I'm going to rule on both actual conflict and the appearance that he covered himself. So I think it makes it very hard for the defense to have an appeal. It does allow Fani Willis to potentially try to appeal the appearance language. In other words, she was given this sort of either or, either you go or he goes, but you can't both stay on. And that was in the appearance of a conflict, part of the case. So she might appeal that, saying that that shouldn't even apply to prosecutors. That was their position to the trial judge. So that's a legal issue. The reason I think that this is of course, it's a win in the sense that she wasn't completely disqualified, but the language here is so scathing with respect to Wade and to her. Remember, there is no finding here that the judge said, I found either of them credible. They both testified. He had very harsh words, particularly harsh words with respect to Wade, and in page 9 gave a litany of places the defense could raise these issues, ethics issues, ethics complaints against both of them. So I think this is something that this is going to linger. We're going to hear more of this because this is what defense lawyers are charged with doing. And so even if there is a choice that Fani Willis makes to have Wade step down and she remains, I think she is still going to be a lightning rod and a liability as this case goes forward. And as I proposed, there is a remedy. She could say somebody else in her office should oversee this, and she will sort of step back so that way her office can proceed. They can proceed quickly. And that's one potential way to go forward, because having done large cases, I can tell you the language in this decision is something we are not done with.
That's what I was going to ask, Lisa. I mean, I know it's unlikely that she's going to step aside, but is there a way for her to, as Andrew Weissman said, step back?
I think there is, and there are two ways that she could step back. One is informally and one is formally, right? She could recuse herself from this case, leave the office in place, and allow the deputy, district attorney, or other senior leadership in her office to really steer this case going forward. We've seen examples of that in the federal system, for example, where people have had to recuse. In the Mueller investigation, for example, Jeff Berman of the Southern District of New York had to recuse himself from issues relating to Rudy Giuliani, for example, and other people dealt with some of that investigation. That's one way she could do it. But the other way that she could do it is to remove herself entirely. Just, I'm not going to even play a role here, as opposed to pushing up other people from her office, letting them take the lead. She could really formally draw that line.